Today, the world has recognized that something our ancestors used to do, the scientists and ancestors that had practiced a particular way of conducting research, they make a big show of practicing today interdisciplinary research. But the fact is that research is by default interdisciplinary. It's just that somehow in between for a few hundred years, we lost track of it and people started getting very narrowly focused. Now we are trying to understand that that is not the best way. And we are getting back to the way our ancestors thought of research in its fundamental form. If we recognize this as the foundation for research, in future, there's a very interesting trend. There is one professor who has prophesied or is forecast that this may be very surprising. He said, we may not have a separate branch called computer science and engineering. And people may be shocked hearing this. Because today, if you think about the most sought after engineering program, it has to do with computer science. And here someone's saying that there may not be any computer science discipline. Now, we have to understand what he's saying. You know, just as today in any branch of knowledge, there is something very fundamental, and that is communication. Now, you can take communication in any language, whether it is in English or any other language, but you have to have that communication. So if you equate it now with computer science and engineering, this professor is saying that we will face a situation in future where every discipline will involve computer science concepts, computer engineering concepts. By default, you can take archaeology, sociology, behavioral sciences, anthropology, economics, you name it. Everything will be integrated with computer science. And so you may not have a situation where people need to take just computer science in itself, unless it's for the sake of advancing computer science and engineering. So with that in mind, I hope that our young friends out there realize that in the future, it's not about just picking one thing, but just understanding that in future, our world needs to parallelly progress service industries and manufacturing industries together. So if you take mechanical engineering, make sure you integrate it with the concepts of computer science and engineering, of economics, of communication, and so on. When that is done, the progress is going to be tremendous, not just progress in that field, but progress in your career. And this is the message that I'd like to give. So whether it is blockchain or IoT or cybersecurity or cyber physical systems, all of these, what we call emerging areas, really it's not about just picking one or the other. You can't say this is better than this and this has more scope in future. It's really not about that. It's about understanding it with Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0. How do I equip myself to contribute to this revolution? And the minute I have the confidence that I am going to contribute in a significant way, the entire world will be at your doorstep, knocking on your door and trying to hire you. So that's the message I'd like to give to our young friends. So this is something I go back to all the time, that the industry across the world has lamented that students who are graduating, a large chunk of them, they are not employable. And a further lament that out of the small percentage that is employable, a very small percentage is actually deployable. This has been a continuous lament for several decades now. Now, we seriously have to ask ourselves, what's going wrong in our education system then? So the answer is, when we look at what happens after they graduate, two things. One, the industry has to take these people that they employ and they have to train them, sometimes for 6 months, sometimes for a year. And that's at cost to the company. Now they are asking this fundamental question: you're spending 4 years in a program. So why are we supposed to train you again? You're supposed to be ready. Now that is one thing. The second thing is, those who do not get placed immediately, we find that they go to these so-called finishing schools. So that means they take maybe a 6-month certification program, a 1-year certification program, and so on. And on the basis of that, somehow they seem to get employed. Now we have to ask this question again: if these finishing schools can do something in these 6 months, in 1 year, why can't we do it in 4 years? Right? So again, it's really not about saying that if you take nanotechnology, you're going to succeed. If you take IoT, you're going to succeed. If you take biotechnology, you're going to succeed. It's really not about that. It's about how you prepare yourself to be instantly deployable. The minute you graduate and you're hired, from day one, you have to be able to contribute there. So the education system also has to be redesigned for that. And the students also have to constantly ask this question in their mind: okay, great, I'm doing this BTech nanotechnology or MTech nanotechnology, but how do I know that I'm going to be deployable from day one? That's the question. And then during the 2 years of MTech or the 4 years of BTech, there will be a drive, an inner drive and motivation for the students to say, okay, I have got these concepts and theories, but how am I going to translate into practice so that the industry knows I'm skilled enough to start contributing from day one? And so now I feel that revolution is slowly taking place, that awakening is taking place in universities. And you'll find that there are plenty of online certification programs which are actually trying to do this. But imagine the benefit will, or the effect will be 100 times more if we offer it in the colleges and universities, because there you can do it offline and hands-on. That will be very powerful in terms of its impact. AI, for example, is going to be all pervasive. Artificial intelligence is something that is going to creep into our lives more and more. And today we talk about how it has crept into health, it has crept into economics, it has crept into manufacturing, it has crept into education, delivery, it has crept into behavioral sciences, many places. And so they will be in great demand. It has even crept into agriculture. So this is definitely going to be in great demand. But at the same time, this is where I'm saying we need to broaden our mental horizons. A person who is a computer scientist may not know enough about agriculture, may not know enough about health. You can't expect that the person who's trained in computer science will suddenly know everything about what an MBBS student studies. It's not possible. But you see, it is possible for a doctor, an MBBS student, to learn some computer science concepts, and they'll become better because they'll know the physiology and the anatomy of the body. And if they are taught AI, they'll become much better contributors to the field of medicine. That's the message that I'm trying to give. So definitely there's lots of scope for AI. There's definitely, now whenever you talk about AI, definitely there has to be protection. So the security part, the network security, the system security, these things will play a huge role. So cybersecurity will play a huge role. Then there is the entire cyber physical systems, which means you'll need your sensors and the sensor networks. You'll need the instruments for measuring. So all these things will be there. So that's where I'm saying, yes, your mechanical engineer and electrical engineer, they're going to play a role, but they have to be up to date with the computer science part of it. Your electronics and communications people, they'll play a huge role. Even with cyber physical systems, you cannot do without the networks, you cannot do without the communications. They have to play their part, but again, they have to have that computer science focus and the analytical skills focus. So these things, if they keep that, keep supplementing with their core discipline, they're definitely going to succeed. Cyber physical systems, cybersecurity. Then you're going to have integration of nano and biotechnologies. You're going to have increasing amounts of material science integrated with the nano and biotechnologies and with health sciences. So these are some of the hot areas. What I would say is that in India, we have a mix of two things happening right now. One, multinational companies which invest a lot in R&D, like GE, BASF, and so on. They definitely would be destinations for our students to consider, because they'll really encourage R&D with these emerging areas. The other part, which I see as a very promising sign in India, is the startup companies. I see some amazing work going on. We have people who with a lot of talent from India itself, and there are many Indians who have gone abroad and gotten their education, higher degrees there, and they've come back and they've started some fantastic work in India. So these are two areas where I would encourage our students to consider. If they are going for these emerging areas, they will get very good prospects for. Yeah, I would always recommend starting with a broad-based UG course and then opt for a master's. However, the trends are shifting these days. So for example, today you even have undergraduate degrees in artificial intelligence. There are places where you have BTech in cybersecurity also. And the government is also supporting these efforts. In future, you may have BTech in IoT, you may have BTech in blockchain. But I've heard from a lot of industry experts and academic experts also, they always recommend that you start with a broader base, a broader foundation in terms of UG. So your traditional disciplines of EEE, ECE, computer science and engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical, civil, aerospace, these things are advocated, recommended for the UG. And the fact is, these days, the curriculum design is is very well thought out. They have these streams of specializations through which you can, a mechanical engineer may have a specialization related to communications or related to computer science or related to math. These things would be very valuable. A mechanical engineer with a specialization in mathematics would be very, very valuable. Similarly, you may have a EEE major who's specializing with blockchain or with IoT, or they may be specializing with smart grid technologies. So such kinds of specializations in UG, followed by a master's which goes more in depth into these emerging areas, that would be recommended. Thank you. Sustainability is inevitable and it is not a matter of choice. Over the last 2 or 3 decades, of course, there has been greater attention to sustainable technologies and sustainable development. Today, we understand that somehow it is not enough if we focus only on technologies, because there is a social aspect to sustainable development. And unless we address this social aspect, technology alone cannot achieve sustainability in the long run. This has a very important bearing on the question. Today, we find that engineering students, for example, they are not taught about the social impact of technologies. And that's a sad thing. So now I personally would recommend that every engineer should have at least one introduction to sociology course in their UG. Only then they will become sensitized to the social interactions and the social impact of technologies. They should understand the impact of the work that they are doing, whether it's in industry or elsewhere. And with that greater sensitization, they will be able to contribute in a much better way towards achieving sustainability. Now, green technologies has so many aspects to it. So there is the social aspect, there is the manufacturing aspect, the green manufacturing, then there's the social sustainability, then there is the green accounting, there's green materials. all these have to be taken into consideration. When we, in future, I also believe that universities may start offering degrees specifically related to green technologies, and they will bring in these elements of the social part, the economics part, and so on, all with the prefix or suffix of green associated with it. Now, green technologies within our university, for example, is offered in many ways. We have it through renewable energy technologies. We have it through the material science and engineering program. We have it even through some of the biotechnology courses where they bring in either the renewable energy part of it, the renewable technology part of it. And then we also have a PhD program which is related to sustainable development. The entire set of students all focus on sustainable development. We have people working on women's empowerment, which is also a very important aspect of achieving sustainability. So all these options are open when it comes to green technologies. In general, the scholarships would be available at the PG level, and either through writing GATE and then joining an MTech or any other master's program. Now, I would recommend again a broad-based UG program, followed by a PG program which may be related to green technologies or environmental studies, environmental management, environmental engineering, environmental sciences. And in fact, there are now programs offered outside the country where they bring in this aspect of sustainable technologies for chemical engineering, sustainable technologies for civil engineering, like that. So those things are yet to mature in India, but I think it won't be too long. It will come. Today, I would recommend for students that go for a broad-based UG, but try to bring in the sustainability aspect in your final year capstone project. And then with the weight of that, with that foundation, other universities would be happy to take you for your masters, and then they will be happy to give you scholarships as well. So both for masters and PhD, there are scholarships for just by virtue of going for masters or going for PhD. There are lots of scholarship options, definitely within India and abroad as well. The world is doing something to always improve the productivity and efficiency, because these are economic drivers. And so one of the ways by which you can boost productivity and efficiency is to bring in the automation and robotics. There are other benefits, of course. There will be situations where the environment may be highly risky or dangerous, and in such cases, a manual intervention, a human being's presence over there may be very risky. It may pose a lot of danger to them. In such situations also, the use of robotics would be of great importance. So on the one hand, boosting the productivity and efficiency. On the other hand, improving the safety for humans overall, whether it's in a production setting, a manufacturing setting, or in any other sphere. For example, in the case of, let us say, floods, fire, etc., a robot may be able to have access where a human may not. So given these two kinds of broad application domains, what we understand today is that in order to get into these, again, in the UG level, see if you can actively participate in hackathons, in all these intercollegiate, inter-university competitions. The team-based activities are an excellent source of learning. And there is another benefit for that to students. A lot of companies do their hiring based on these hackathons. So they find that, when students are put in that real life situation and they get to see how they react and how they respond in such situations, the companies also feel more comfortable using that as an assessment for hiring them. So hackathons and other competitions are a healthy way to learn in a hands-on way. Additionally, students should also participate in all the professional society events like IEEE events, ACM events, the National Capture the Flag events, ethical hacking. These kinds of events would be very good learning opportunities for the students. The third thing which I mentioned earlier is to do with the capstone project in the final year. But here I want to suggest and recommend to students that they should not wait till the final year. They should do their projects from the first year itself. They should find some dynamic faculty who are willing to support them. It need not even be part of the curriculum, but they can just take up some extra projects and learn in a hands-on practical way with respect to automation and robotics. I mentioned about robotics. Now it has space applications, it has manufacturing applications, it has health applications. Today, we have heard about how doctors, surgeons do remote surgery. And that's amazing, because then you need such a high level of confidence in doing something like this. So it shows the state of the art, the progression that has been made with robotics and automation. So students should be encouraged to look up, whether it's on the internet or anywhere, to look up these cutting edge application domains and take up projects in these right from their first year of undergraduate itself. By the time they get to their third year and then they go for the placements and so on, they will have so much to really talk about and put on their resume that companies will be excited to interact with them. When it comes to salaries, anything to do with computer science and information technologies, naturally it's right up there at the top when it comes to salaries. So I think students need not worry at all about it. Now the second part, how do they approach this to get into a career based on the security, cybersecurity and so on. So again, there are mixed opinions regarding this. Personally, I feel it's always good to have a broader base, have a computer science UG degree, and then build upon it. Now, the advantage would be, even with cybersecurity, it's important to know, what are the elements of cybersecurity. The student will get to know whether they should focus on the mathematics part, the cryptology part, or should they focus on the networking part? Should they focus on the hardware part? So it's important for the students to have a knowledge of what are all these elements that go into the broader domain of cybersecurity. Once they prepare themselves, then they can think about the specializations. And the advantage is your UG program is a little longer, it's 4 years. And during that time, you'll have ample opportunity. If you have the initiative and the inner drive, you'll have the opportunity to take courses. Today, you have all these online platforms, MOOCs like Coursera and edX and Udacity and all these, Udemy and so on. So all these have some really good courses. And then even through the Indian portals like NPTEL and SWAYAM and so on, there are many opportunities. So I would suggest that students take a broad-based UG and then they start building their credentials using these additional online MOOCs courses. Then they'll have the breadth of vision to decide, okay, do I want to go in this direction or this direction and so on. So I feel that, when you go in the cybersecurity master's program, then you would be really well prepared to decide. I would say that, these days students sometimes forget that they actually can choose which industry they want to go to. But a lot of times what happens, if they've not really applied themselves and prepared themselves well, they may think, oh, let me just get some job. Now, it shouldn't be like that. A student who has really prepared very well, they should be able to stand there and say, now, do I want this company or this company or this company? They should have that kind of confidence. And that can come when you have a very strong foundation. So I would definitely recommend a broad-based UG, then build upon it with these certification courses. Then you can consider which is the right PG program for you. Based on a conversation I had with some colleagues, some scientists recently, as recent as about a week ago. So casually, when we were having a conversation, I happened to mention saying, hey, the talent pool, the brain pool that we have in India, if you compare across the world, really it's not so bad in India. And so they felt offended. They said, what do you mean it's not so bad? They said, if you forget the fact that we are a little bit disadvantaged in terms of the facilities that we have, either in school level or in UG level and so on, they said, if you forget that, and second, if you forget the fact that we often tend to have a little bit less exposure in terms of the hands-on experience, not just hands-on in terms of the technical, the labs in college and so on, but in general, you may see that kids in the US, they start working at a very young age. They have access to lots of tools in their garage and so on. So the hands-on experience, either in terms of taking responsibility for their time, the time management and financial management and so on, that kind of exposure is perhaps a little less in India compared to, let's say, the US. But if you look at the technical aptitude, my colleagues, the scientists, they were saying there is no match. Indians are way better. And so they spoke with so much confidence. And I had to agree with them, because if you supplemented the natural technical aptitude that Indians have with this kinds of hands-on experience, the exposure to the right facilities and so on, India would be far ahead. So what you mentioned as being ranked at number 5, I feel it's just a matter of time before we reach the top and sit there firmly. The brain pool is that tremendous. Now, having said that, going back to your question, what will be the future for students who want to get into R&D? So first thing is, they have to have confidence in themselves that in India, we are sitting on a large brain pool. So whether it is in terms of our natural aptitude or the guidance, that means the teachers who can actually train us, I think we are very good. But there is scope for improvement in some ways. One, in general, you will see in India, if you look at the R&D budget in companies, multinational companies definitely do invest a lot more in terms of the R&D budget, and they get rewarded for it. Now, I used to work for 3M company in the past, and they had this policy that 25% of their revenue had to come from products made in the last 5 years. This was a rule. We had to follow it. So there is a constant push for R&D to innovate and innovate and innovate. Now, not all companies are like this. There are small and medium scale industries where they may not be able to budget in enough R&D. So students who want to get into R&D, they have to make the right kind of choice to first do their homework and see who's actually investing a lot in R&D, and then they can feel confident going there. Now, there's also the R&D government organizations such as the CSIR labs, the Baba Atomic Research Center, DRDO, ISRO, and so on. These would be wonderful places also, because they get a lot of freedom, excellent facilities. So if somebody is interested in R&D, I would definitely recommend them to try these government organizations also. I can speak from my own experience being within Amrita University. If you look at where you would encounter nanotechnology, first of all, of course, there are UG level electives, but at a PG level, at a postgraduate level, we have an MTech in nanotechnology and nanosciences. There's nano-biomolecular medicine. Then you also have nanotechnology in a very significant way in the MTech material science and engineering program, in the biomedical engineering program, in renewable energy technologies, and so on. So all of these areas, definitely nano plays a big part. Students, again, if they can identify their specific interests, some of them, suppose they have an orientation towards life sciences, biology in particular, there are excellent opportunities in terms of combining the nano and bio in material science research. There's a lot of materials research that focus on the implants, body implants, because you need biocompatible materials. Then there are all the materials which go, for example, into defense and space applications, where you may need very specific properties. So, for example, they should be abrasion resistant when space shuttles re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, or they should be permeation resistant. They should not allow oil or water to permeate through certain bladders that are used in spaceships, for example, or in dialysis. So there are lots of these applications where the use of nanomaterials to enhance the properties of these materials plays a huge role. Then there are also applications where nanomaterials are used to impregnate other substrates to improve properties. For example, nuclear waste storage containers. They don't want the radiation to leak out. Lots of such applications are there. So material science is very huge if you're thinking of nano technologies. In addition, you also have a lot of opportunities in communication, in electronics, and civil engineering as well. And then, of course, defense applications, defense technologies. All these areas, I would recommend looking at it at the PG level. Biotechnology as well. First of all, this question immediately brings to mind NEP 2020, the National Education Policy. And there are several reforms already in that, which I am very, very hopeful about, that they can bring about some very good improvements in our institution. So the academic banking of credits, for example, which gives a lot of flexibility to students if they want to take breaks in the studies and so on. They can mix and match from across different fields of knowledge, different domains. They can take additional credits. There's no limit to that. So I think all these kinds of changes are very good, but we have to get down to some basics, I think, in India, which changes have been due for a very long time. So for example, the famous statement that was made by a scientist, I think more than a decade ago, he said in India, we don't have an education system, we have an examination system. It's very sad to hear something like that. So definitely that kind of focus and obsession that we have with these exams, I think we need to take a hard look at it and see if we can do a lot better. The fear of exams that students have, it almost seems to paralyze them from learning anything. So how do we build a system where the delivery and the assessments are more in alignment with the student's mindset in present times? Maybe that system worked in the past, but we have to look at how it is, whether it is really aligned with the mindsets of students right now. That, I think, will fetch us some good rewards. The other part is, again, the old lament of why is it that we don't do things in a more hands-on way. The traditional labs, I feel, have to go. We should have more open labs where students design their own experiments and they actually can fabricate the setups. And through that, the learning will be tremendous. But this also means greater investment on the part of schools and universities, where the right kind of infrastructure, the thinker space or maker space kind of labs should be available. There should be flexibility in the syllabus for the lab courses. With that, I think a lot can be done. One way of achieving this is to have some industry partners where they actually can set up the labs so that the knowledge that is created, the prototypes that are created would partly cater to the industry's needs as well. So that way both parties benefit from this. I think these are some ideas that come immediately to mind. I'm sure there are a lot many more, but I feel quite hopeful that the NEP would introduce some very good reforms.